Hello, and welcome to Imperial Lates Online, The Sun, the latest in our public event series exploring research at Imperial College. My name is Chelsea.
And I'm Ahmed.
And we will be hosting the student takeover of the Imperial Lates Day in the Life of a talk series. Today we're going to be talking about women in STEM, and I am joined by Dr. Kibirige.
Hello, hi, pleased to meet you, everyone.
Hello, nice to meet you. And thanks again for joining us. So my first question to you is, what's a typical day for you as an immuno-conqueror?
A typical day for me. Well, this week, for example, I was training my new research assistant. So when I met her in the lab, I organized a 3-day induction. So on the first day in the lab, I took her around the molecular lab, showed her our setup. We did a lot of cleaning as part of the training, and also because I'd had some contamination problems. And then we set up an experiment. I demonstrated it to her and then got her to do a more of a hands-on. And then we analyzed the data. And then on the second day, I went over the data with her, did some troubleshooting, went over her pipetting technique, and then gave her a manuscript to read that covers the work that we're going to be working on and explains the assay that I had actually got her to run. And then on the third day, I then explained more of the project, and we run a second experiment.
That's so interesting. So can I ask, what are you and your newly acquired trainee working on these days?
So the research assistant is going to be helping me with a project. I work with the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, and we have a vaccine screening assay where we get cells from people who've been involved in vaccine trials, and we differentiate them into their CD4 and CD8 subsets, and then measure the ability of the CD8 T cells to prevent HIV infection or reduce HIV infection in the infected or mock-infected CD4 T cells. So usually there's two versions of the assay. One, after 13 days, you measure the amount of P24, which is an HIV protein in the supernatant, or on day 8, you can measure the amount of fluorescently labeled virus. But with the assays I've been developing, they're PCR-based assays where you measure the amount of RNA or DNA, HIV RNA or DNA. We're actually able to see these differences within 3 days. So I'm hoping to publish that soon. I'm still optimizing it, and the research assistant will help me finalize those experiments and put the manuscript together.
So clearly you're very well knowledgeable about what you do and very passionate about it. Did you always have this passion as a young person?
Yes, actually, I knew from a very young age. I was born in Kenya to Ugandan parents, and around the time I was in secondary school, so about 14, 15, HIV hit Uganda, and we've just come out of a civil war, so it greatly affected our nation, and I lost close relatives and close friends. So it was something that really impacted me, and something that I knew I wanted to be involved in studying and solving. I was always good with the biological sciences. I knew I wanted to get involved in science. So I knew from that very young age, after losing, close relatives, that I wanted to be involved in HIV research.
It's often like the best researchers in the world, like yourself, that have some sort of deep passion and a reason for doing what they do. So, and that's very, very clear in yourself.
Thank you. Yes, I think a lot of us get drawn towards solving problems that we experienced on a very personal level.
That actually leads us on to our next question, which is, what would you say is your proudest achievement? And could you tell our viewers the story of how it happened?
So my proudest achievement is actually managing to get involved in HIV research and actually getting to the point now where I am contributing to the field and building capacity back home, and being part of the solution going on back home. It hasn't been a very easy road. There's been a lot of discouragements. I think I had initially I wanted to be a doctor, didn't quite get the grades. Got onto a biochemistry course, but when I graduated, couldn't quite get a job certainly not in HIV. So I went home and did some volunteer work and rested, and volunteered with the Ministry of Health, and actually got sent out to work in Uganda, in Rakai, which was the area in Uganda where HIV first broke out. In Uganda, when you mention HIV, when you mention Rakai, everyone thinks HIV because when the problem was at its worst, there were all these images on the TV of really elderly grandparents looking after lots and lots of grandchildren, because a lot of the middle-aged population was really affected by the disease. So it was nice to go out there, and it actually really helped me realize exactly why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. That's me when I was very young. That was me getting my field experience in Uganda. But it's nice. I'm proud to still be involved in HIV research and be involved in training scientists back home and providing solutions to the problem back home.
So you said that there were a few bumps on the road to getting to where you are today. Could you possibly describe to us some of the more challenging things that you've had to overcome to become an imperial researcher?
So one of the problems, I guess, that became quite acute was struggling with my mental health. I do have a mental health disability, and it's been quite a journey discovering it and getting a diagnosis and figuring out the right treatment, and figuring out how to manage it, as well as a really grueling and sometimes quite stressful scientific career. So that, I think, if there's anything that's made me want to give up, it's that. You know, wondering whether I'm really in the right field given my struggles with my health. But I'm glad that I'm achieving that balance, and I'm even if I still have my not so good days, I'm still managing to stick it out and produce good work, and I'm still involved in science.
And as someone who also has a mental health disability, reading your article was so inspiring. And I'd like to say to any of our audience, if any of you have any kind of condition, please reach out for help. Help is available. Talk to your GPs. Get in contact with someone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
So when you, sorry. So I'm sorry to hear that you have this personal struggle. But you did a bit of your work in the US first, right? Before coming back to the UK. So how did that change from the USA to the UK, sort of improve your work-life balance? Like, what was it that actually worked for you?
Right. So I did my undergrad here, and went to Uganda actually just to rest. That was one of the times when I had had a really bad episode, I guess, with my health. So went home to rest and volunteered for the Ministry of Health, and they were collaborating with the Johns Hopkins University in the US, as well as the US military. So I got sponsored for some initial training, and then managed to get on a course and did my PhD out there. And then ended up doing my first postdoctoral fellowship and second postdoctoral fellowship out there. I was on a student visa, and got to the point where I couldn't extend my visa anymore, and had to come home because I had become a British citizen right before I left. So coming back, I think as a citizen, I have more options in terms of the work that I do. I think in the US, I had a student visa, and everything was tied to my visa and tied to my job. And I think the pace of life there, especially the East Coast, and at Johns Hopkins, the pace of life is highly competitive. And they do expect you to work late hours while you're a student. So I think here now I'm more working, even if it's a postdoc. I think here the laws are stricter in terms of no unnecessarily late working. I think my line manager has to justify if I have to work too many out of hours, out of office hours. So I think Imperial College definitely have a much better culture in those terms, and they provide much more support generally for women in STEM, minorities, disabilities. So I found it much easier to integrate into the work here, and even with my disability, and manage to contribute and develop a better work-life balance. And I don't
Well,
think it's necessarily affected my output either. So I think you do, if you do take care of your health and well-being, you perform better. So it's definitely helped me kind of manage that better.
I most definitely agree. And as students here at Imperial as well, that's very comforting to hear. So just last question for me, I think. So looking back on your life in Uganda, how has that specifically helped to shape the academic that we see today, that's sort of taking things on in a world stage? Yeah.
Well, I think Uganda, like I say, is my home country. That's where my mother is based. That's where my relatives are. I think when I went there to rest, when I finished my undergrad, I was pretty burnt out, and I had been applying for jobs with some of the larger companies, but weren't able to get the type of the positions that would have led me to the kind of role that I have now. So I think Uganda, being from back home, represents just the possibilities and the support, because obviously my family wouldn't let me give up, and I was able to get the placement, through the Ministry of Health, and they put me right in the center of the action as far as HIV goes, and got me onto a sponsorship scheme. So that really opened the door for the rest of my HIV career. So it's just, and then really also showed me the possibilities of being able to collaborate and still be involved even now, and be able to give back, and collaborate. Right now, like I said, I'm working with the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. The person who suggested I apply and present my work to them was somebody who I initially met in Uganda, who also worked for the US military, and saw me present at a conference and just said, you should present to the lab in Imperial. And so it really has shaped my career, and also really just made me stay the course, because I definitely want to be involved in HIV regardless of what anybody says. And then I'm also really keen to give back. So it's nice to be working with an organization that has field sites in Africa, students from Africa rotating through. I get to train other African scientists and transfer any innovations that I make to transfer back home and see their impact. So.
So it's great to hear from women like yourself, and that's really the whole point of like this talk series, is to give voices to women of color like yourself, to inspire younger women who aspire to work in STEM in the future. If you had something to say to young girls out there who want to join STEM, what would you say to them?
I would tell them to keep at it, and to just follow their passion, pursue their dreams. Your passion always comes through when you're hit with discouragement or setbacks. It's your passion for what you're doing that will keep you going. So you really want to find your passion, find what your gifts and your talents are, and stick with them. It can be very male dominated. It can be very discouraging. There are a lot of knocks and setbacks, but you really need to focus on, what your goals are, what you want to achieve. Um, you want to be married to your vision, um, and not necessarily married to an organization, or married to a particular um, a country, even, because I've
Mhm.
moved countries quite a bit. But then my vision has always been, or what's driven me has always been that, I want to, whatever, regardless of what has happened, I want to be involved in HIV, and I want to be involved in increasing the capacity of African scientists, and producing or doing research that has impact not just around the whole world, but specifically in developing countries and settings like Uganda. And that has really kept me going. And just find yourself some good mentors, people who can pick you up when you're flailing, and just pursue your dreams. I think we have a lot to offer as women in science. We have we have the ability for sure, and we also have the right mindset, because we tend to have the perseverance. We tend to be detail oriented. We tend to really be able to put in the work that's required. So we should just, I would tell any women out there to just keep going regardless of a discouragement. Because if you are passionate about something, then you will see it through.
Thank you so much for that, Catherine. And as a young girl sort of pursuing a career in medicine, it's very nice to have you. And I hope our viewers find the same. I'm sure Ahmed as well would love to continue chatting with you today, but that's all the time that we have. So thanks so much for tuning in, everyone, for this special edition of... Oh, I'm so sorry for cutting you off. Thank you for tuning in for this special edition of Imperial Lates Online, and special thanks to Dr. Kibirige for sharing her day in the life. If you've enjoyed this talk,
go ahead.
If you check out the rest of the Imperial Lates The Sun program, we've got loads of great things on over the week, and there's a link in the YouTube description for you to explore what else there is to come. Otherwise, that's it from us. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.